Hello and welcome to the first week in review of 2025. Yes, because last week we did a repeat of the year in review. As usual, I'm your host Ade Darami, and not as usual, but infrequently, I have my colleague Usman Jatta. Usman, welcome to the program.
I'm honored to share the same platform with you.
And honored to have you here. And we have Lamin Disonko doing the signing. And yes, as ever, for those who know the show, you know what it's all about. For those who don't, it's called The Week in Review for a very good reason. What's that reason? Well, we take 10 stories from the week just past and we go through them in some detail. A word of warning here. Some stories demand more of our time than others. So don't panic if you think we're spending too much time on one story. It really is meant to be that way. Anyway, enough of that. What stories have we got? I hear you shouting. Well, we've got books, textbooks. After a 4-year gap, textbooks have now been made available to our schools by the Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education. Also, the party, DOI, the People's Democratic Organization for Independence and Socialism, they recently had a look, particularly Secretary General Halifa Sallah, at the promulgation bill, which was set before the National Assembly, and he had some very interesting take on that. Also, we look at the plight of the hard of hearing students. What do they have to put up with? Colleague here did that story. Residents of Bundung are rejoicing. Why, I hear you ask? Well, if you'd ever plied the road before, it used to be dreadful. All that's been fixed and they are rather happy about it. And also something quite serious, a national plan for to tackle the substandard medicines and falsified medicines that come into our country. We're now finally going to get around to developing a national plan to tackle that. So these are some of the stories. So let's get cracking, shall we? Well, first up, the one I mentioned right at the top of the program, textbooks. They've now been made available after a very long wait. Why? Well, this will tell you. Have a look, have a listen.
The Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education has not printed or distributed textbooks to schools in the Gambia since the lifespan of the last batch of distributed books ended in 2021. This has affected teaching and learning in schools, as textbooks empower students to learn independently and help them understand complex concepts or topics. Now, textbooks will be distributed across the country: early childhood development, lower and upper basic schools. Here is Dr. Habibatu Drame, Minister of Basic and Secondary Education.
Textbooks are being provided to school students free of charge. So this should be very clear to the public. No one should buy these books from the schools. The initiative represents a significant investment in the future.
There were some challenges in getting them printed in India. Remember, this involves a lot of work in terms of material review, whether there is some revision on the script or on the materials to be included in the new script before they are printed. Like you rightly said, they are very costly, and therefore what needs to be done must be done very well to avoid wastage of resources. That's one of the reasons for the delay of printing these books.
Usman, you're a lot younger than I, and so your time at school was much more recent than myself.
Sure.
Do you remember the thrill, the buzz of getting new textbooks? Does that story take you back to then?
Sure, it tells a lot actually. Like giving new textbooks, you know, you're always excited to read ahead, more especially if you're a passionate student, like more especially in the arts field,
right,
where you would have to read subjects like literature, you know, geography and so forth. So
yes,
it's always exciting to have new books.
Sure. So now we're here, a 3-year delay. But I guess, shall we give them a bit of slack and say, you know, they talked about it. I mean, I've been involved in publishing books and magazines. And in both cases, sometimes there's a lot of checking, proofreading, there's back and forth. But 3 years seems rather a long gap between this and the previous distribution.
Absolutely. It's long overdue. And the reason being is schools cannot operate without books. You know, books help the students to to have a guide of the curriculum actually. Without the books, it's going to be like a blind way of learning actually. So, but I think some of the reasons pointed out, needs to be looked at properly, and there are lessons, one could gain from it. One of the challenges given was the printing, and the printing was done all the way in India.
Yeah.
So it tells a lot about gaps in the country, and there is a need for the government to work harder to make sure that these books, to find ways of making sure that these books are printed in the country.
Well,
that would help.
if not even in the country,
Yes.
possibly closer. Because when I saw this story, and one of the reasons I wanted this story, I'll be honest, is that there are two reasons. One about the printing, which you've kind of highlighted already, all the way in India. And I thought, what about Nigeria? What about Ghana? Much bigger countries which have to print a lot more books
Even
than
Senegal.
and even Senegal next door. Again, Senegal, I know somebody who, they were printing a magazine and they had it printed in Senegal and the quality was of the highest. So there's that. But the other one was I wanted the bit where the minister mentions that these are free of charge. Because when the story was broadcast, I have to say the cynical view in the office straight away was that you'll find some of these books being sold even though it has stamped on it not for sale. What's your experience of that particularly?
That's the question. It will always raise the question, how did it get to their hands?
Correct.
But it's always like that. You can always like people will argue, you cannot avoid corruption in most cases. But I think it's important that the books are distributed for free actually, because most parents cannot afford to buy all of the books. And that is why when the delay occurred, it would have affected most parents, because you would still have the books in stock in some of the bookshops, but it will be costly because for the fact that there is a scarcity of the books at the time. So, but the fact that they are in town, it would help a lot. It will help a lot.
So what do we tell the parents? Report to the police if you see these books being sold? What's the message?
That's a bit complicated actually, because you can never tell how the books got there. So. But probably they are reprinting it. That could also happen, it could be in many aspects. Because if you look at the Gambia's copyright law, like when books are printed, like for the purpose of education, like it's allowed actually. But aside from that, like when it is going to be for economic purposes, in most cases, you would be liable to certain charges.
You're breaching copyright. Yeah.
Sure. So I don't think it would be a problem, like for somebody to print it for the sole purpose of education.
Sure.
So.
But they'd be making a profit from it. But anyway,
that's it.
Let's keep our fingers crossed. A, that they're distributed as they should be across the country, and B, that they are given free of charge. Thank you for that, Osman. And now on to our second story. I mentioned that the People's Democratic Organization for Independence and Socialism, most people in Gambia just refer to them as DOI. They hosted a press conference, and here's some of what Halifa Sallah had to say.
No term limit existed in 1970. That's why the first president stayed here for almost 30 years. No term limit exists in the 1997 Constitution. That is why the last president stayed for 22 years. And it was only by galvanizing the Gambian people that we were able to bring about the change, to give the country a new start, and ensure that a transition would be nurtured that will prepare the Gambian people for a new political dispensation.
Prepare for a new political dispensation. Osman, I'm smiling because we had this discussion both when the story was broadcast and subsequently before this program. But what is your take on what he has to say? We could have chosen many. He addressed many subjects at that event, which was covered by our colleague Mamna Bukhari.
Sure.
But I just chose one. I could have chosen 9 or 10 others. I just chose this one because it's always a talking point.
Sure. I think it's a good point that you took this part actually. It represents the entire constitution, like the new redraft actually. But I think if I am to be candid, this new draft is a test of time for the Gambia's democracy, and to also tell how concerned or how serious Gambians are towards taking ownership of their country. That's very, very important. And if you listen to Halifa Sallah, that is one thing he always put emphasis on. That is like Gambians taking ownership of their country. And I think that is very critical. And, you know, that is why he also did mention about the chances of because it's the National Assembly members who should allow the bill to move to the second stage, then to the committee stage, so that it could go back to the people
for
where they would look at it holistically to tell whether they are in line with some of the provisions mentioned in the Constitution.
Yes, I mean, but yes, I mean, the honest thing is that there'll be a lot more looking at it by our National Assembly members than the public, really, because it's a long document. How many people are going to read it? And it's always written only in English, as far as I'm aware. And so we rely on them. And I think that's one of the points that he raised, that, you know, we rely on them to do that scrutiny, which you've just mentioned. But on the matter specifically, is he slightly undermining the point he's making about term limits? Because it wasn't term limits that got rid of Yahya Jammeh. The ultimate term limit, as I was saying in our prior discussion, is you don't vote for somebody, you vote for somebody else.
Sure.
That is the ultimate term limit. You can have enforced term limits, and we know countries in our region, Senegal, Sierra Leone, have term limits. We don't. But like I said, it wasn't term limits that got rid of Yahya Jammeh, it was the ballot box. People voted for someone else.
Sure, like that is a fact, but there's a new trend that he's trying to point out, like the political manipulation in the country that politicians use, like to get the people to be voted in office, you know. So that is one thing he wants.
Is term limits going to change that?
Yeah, it would help to some extent. You know, the importance of having the term limits is, it will give Gambians like more consciousness and that control over their democracy, and which will serve as a warning point, despite the fact that the time limit could be like, they say, like 2 minutes, two term limits.
Sure.
But in actual sense, if somebody does not perform as expected, like it's 5 years. 5 years is not 5 months. It's not 5 days.
In Ghana, it's 4, by the way. And
yes,
it's still 2 terms. Already.
So it would, despite the fact that it is two term, it will still put that that warning for anybody who is in power, you know, to understand that I am here, but they could remove me, you know, if I underperform,
if I don't deliver.
So that is it. It will help the electorate to have the power. It will help to promote accountability, and equally as well, importantly, it would help to promote development in the country.
So like, Paul Kagame is watching this. Paul, Mr. Kagame, what are your thoughts?
Yes,
you've been there for 29 years now, or 30.
In Kagame's case, it's a different perspective. We're talking about delivery. Now, when they deliver, now their chances of being voted for a second time grows higher. And like I said, it will promote,
third and a fourth and a fifth.
It will promote development. Now, if any sitting president comes, you will come with your plans, your agenda, like the government has the National Recovery Plan. What could happen is, if another president comes, you will not get rid of that plan. You would work towards continuing that plan.
You mean if another president comes?
Yes, in actual sense, it will promote development.
But is that realistic, that we have what you're referring to, the Recovery Focused National Development Plan 2027, you know, 2023 to 2027? If someone else wins, are they likely to adopt that? Because otherwise, you would say, why didn't you keep the guy?
They don't necessarily have to adopt everything, but they could also make improvements if they feel like there is a need to update certain areas of the economy. So I think that will help a lot. That will help a lot in our development, rather than like if somebody rules for like close to 30 years, you know, when you feel like this guy was a dictator, so you just scrapped everything.
Paul Biya, 40 years. Sassou Nguesso in Congo, not DR Congo,
what have they done in their countries to stay for 40 years?
Museveni, 42 years.
But what have they done to allow, like, to keep people voting for them? Is the question.
Of course,
like,
of course.
Are they working for their country? Like in the case of Rwanda, which is always
you
like,
can see.
Yes,
we always use it as the touchstone.
So
don't we?
I think if we have such leaders, Gambians will not mind, you know, electing you year over year. And I think despite the fact that there is a term limit, if Gambians feel like you're doing extremely well, because they're the electorates, if
So
they
if we
decide to
don't-
keep to you, they could even bypass the the constitution to
No,
some extent.
No, you cannot.
I know,
So
which
we
is
can't, we
not
can't have
what-
our cake and eat it too.
Sure.
We can't say we would like somebody who is very good to go beyond term limits.
Term limits, yeah.
I guess, term limits, they're not kind of, it's blanket. And the reason we're discussing this is we know that ECOWAS had suggested to all ECOWAS member states that they should have term limits.
Yeah.
Not all of them do, as we know here in the Gambia, we don't. And that's really why we're having this discussion, because they're trying to impose something, a kind of arbitrary, sort of set of rules that should be 2, could be 3, could be 4, who knows. But they said the ideal would be 2. But, I think whatever the case is, you have to leave it up to countries, because had Rwanda been in West Africa, not in East Africa, and had that been adopted, what do? You come at the end of your 2 terms, you're Paul Kagame, and the public want to keep you on. And they say, sorry, Mr. Kagame, we can't, off you go, because there are term limits. So
Sure.
it's not a
Yeah, if
straightforward.
that happens to some extent, they would have you must update the constitution to some extent.
You can't update it based on an individual, and that's the point.
Yes, that is what I'm
That is
saying
the point,
actually. So
yeah.
it becomes a challenge. I think that's a critical point. That's a critical point, of course. Yeah,
Okay,
sure.
I think this one will run and run, as they say. Well, thank you
Sure.
for that. And now on to another matter, and again, another serious matter. We talk about how people with disabilities are disadvantaged in the Gambia. You don't have to take my word for it. Go to 99% of the buildings in this country, for example, they don't have wheelchair access. Okay, that's just one example. But we had a colleague, Mam Nabuka, who's looking at a range of them. And one of the ones that she was looking at, and our colleague Usman Jatta took on the story, is about the plight of hard of hearing students. Here's some of what they have to put up with.
It's making us handicapped for some teachers, for some areas, because it's not easy teaching here. All our training here is on the job training. Most of us is on the job training. I have been here for, let's say, 30 years now. I have never gone for overseas training to learn this sign language. All the sign language I know, I learn it here in the school. Every teacher comes here, we train as you are teaching. Every Friday, we normally have classes for teachers on sign language.
So some of the misconceptions are deaf people are very difficult. They easily consume anger, and all those things. All those are myths. So they're not true. Everyone can be easily angered. Some people are also saying when you work with deaf people, you might have a deaf child also. This is not sure. We're all working with deaf people, and we enjoy working with deaf people.
And in that report, you saw Lamindi Sonko's twin, identical twin. Of course, he was the man himself. And he was telling us about some of the things. And Usman, the misconceptions and the myths. You did this story.
Sure.
And in fact, you were passionate enough that actually we were just going to include this as part of a wider story. And you said, no, this is one that deserves to stand alone based on the seriousness of what came through in the interviews that you looked through in the footage.
So I think it's a very crucial story because it's trying to empower the voiceless to some extent. That is like the hard of hearing community who have been suffering for quite a long time, for over 3 decades, and I think it's crucial. It's a call for action. It's high time society turns to them to give them the needed attention they need, and government as well. It's very crucial because, like Mr. Sonko would mention, like people have misconceptions against them. That is like they are hard to deal with, and if you're teaching them or if you're dealing with them, you might get a child who is also like them. So those are just misconceptions, and they are not necessarily the truth. So, and I think the most important thing is they are part and parcel of society, and they should be treated as normal people in society. And it is important that Mr. Sonko did mention about that they are taxpayers. They are part of the economy. They are contributing towards the growth of the economy. So they should not be left out.
Yes, and you're harming yourself by disadvantaging a whole section of people who could be contributing. Absolutely right.
So I think what could be done to help them is, as suggested by both the second vice principal and Mr. Sonko. That is like having trained interpreters and teachers like at the college and at the University of the Gambia. In that way around, you would have these people distributed to public offices where the chances of the hard of hearing community having access to jobs would be easier, rather than like now if there are vacancies and you invite somebody who has a challenge, or like somebody who is a hard of hearing, the person they'll be like, we don't have anybody to help us interpret what this
during
person
an
is saying.
interview,
Yes.
for example. Yeah,
But with this foundation having a course, a program at the UTG is possible. Just today I saw one lady reading Chinese and she was able to introduce herself in Chinese, and guess what? She's studying at the University of the Gambia. So if the University of the Gambia is able to offer courses in Chinese, I think there is no reason they should not be able to like have courses, you know, linked to sign language and interpretation. That would really help, and that will also empower them, and equally as well, it will promote job, the availability of jobs for them.
Well, yes, I mean, for me, and one of the reasons why I really wanted to go to with this story was I was infuriated when I heard the vice principal there saying that he's been doing this for 30 years.
30 years.
And all the training he's got has been on the job training.
Job training.
So we go to these conferences and seminars and we validate this document, we validate that document. But this is the reality. You know, you have a teacher who's been teaching for 30 years. He's never had any training in this. He's all been on board. And they're struggling to get others to come on board.
This was what I once told Mr. Mbosh in one of our programs. I said the government should see some of these stories as a point of like inspiration, or like to take up like the matter from there, because we're setting the stage for them. That is why the media is very important. It's called the fourth estate. Like, you know, it's important for the government to see the media as equal partners. This has been happening, but rarely you see people talk about it. People talk about politics, people talk about political parties, forgetting that there are communities, you know, of hard of hearing people who are suffering for decades now. So I think it's high time the government take up the matter from here. You know, there could be a solution to it. I believe there is a solution to it. If they are handling matters like French, Chinese, trust me, we could really handle
sign language as well.
And it will be interesting to explain this brief story. I boarded a car with a lady who was hard of hearing. So, but she could write English, proper English. She was like, she wrote something and she was like, I would alight at this place. I had to tell the driver, you have to be careful of such people, because, you know, at times you may not know, you may think that the person is just keeping quiet. So I think it's important that we have such things at school that we run. It will help to promote their welfare and development in the country.
Well, let's hope that everybody who matters is listening. Thank you for that, Usman.
Sure.
And that takes us on to story number 4. And in the top of the program, I mentioned about Bundung and how the residents used to have a really, really terrible road to deal with. Now they are rejoicing. Why are they rejoicing? This clip will give you an idea.
We are extremely happy with the reconstruction of this highway because it has made our work much easier. Before, the journey from here to Serekunda could involve up to 2 breakdowns along the way. It was also difficult to find customers due to the poor road conditions. But now, as you can see, I look much cleaner, and so does my car.
And there we have this taxi driver telling he looks cleaner, and so does his car. Now, for those who hadn't experienced the road, they might be thinking, what on earth is he talking about? You and I, we've been on that road, and we know what it used to be like. Now, these are the kind of things, when they happen, we kind of take them for granted. You know, we've talked many times about the improvements in the Bertel-Harding Highway. But for somebody who is a commercial driver, having to ply a road which is substandard and bad, you know, then that driver is going to lose customers, because, you know, who wants to you know, get in a car when by the end of the journey you're filthy, the car is filthy, and you step out and you're stepping out into mud. That's all gone now, and the residents and the drivers are more than happy to speak to our colleague Loliam Kamara when she went to do that story.
I think it's a very good move, a significant achievement, and I think the government should continue, embarking on such projects, more especially in strategic areas like Bundung, because Bundung, this road is not only meant for the people of Bundung. The road connects to Serekunda, one of the busiest markets in the country.
Absolutely.
So it would go a long way in supporting access, to the market, and that would also bring about more improvement in terms of business, because, like alluded by the National Assembly member for Bundung Kakunda, Suleiman Jame, when the roads were constructed, it brought new, business opportunities in the area, and I think that is very, very good. And it should serve as a learning point. Every success story is a learning point for the government, and I think it's gradually, but with time we will get there. We have seen what has happened in the capital before and now. It was way, in a very bad condition, but now if you go to the capital, though you will question some of the buildings, but the road infrastructure, I think it is significantly
the road
improved.
infrastructure, the drainage infrastructure has improved massively
it has improved.
in the capital.
So it's a gradual process. So some of these things have to be diversified, like they have to go, decentralized to some extent. They have to go, and we've heard in the president's speech during the Meet the People tour, he did mention that he is currently at the capital, but when the time he comes to KMC, the people of KMC will understand that he's back. And I think it's very, very important. It's very, very important, because aside from the market, we equally have a hospital. That's a Bundung hospital. So it will help a lot. The maternal hospital. So imagine if the ambulances or cars cannot have access to get to those, to get to the health facility. It's going to be disaster. So it's high time to give priority to such areas. It's high time. It's
high time, and as I said, the residents are celebrating big time. Thank you for that, Usman. And now on to story number 5, which will also take us to the midway point in terms of stories. We are now in the midst of drafting a national plan to tackle substandard and falsified medical products, I beg your pardon. And that plan is already underway. Have a look, have a listen.
Substandard and falsified medical product is a burden on the economic and social life of people worldwide, as WHO stated that countries spend an estimated 30.5 billion per year on substandard and falsified medical products, which can have a serious budget implication for developing countries like the Gambia.
The availability of safe and effective medicines is fundamental to the well-being of individuals and the overall public health of any nation.
For any nation, it's fundamental. Usman, you and I, anybody watching this who is Gambian or who has an interest in Gambia, of course, will remember the acute kidney injury, 61 confirmed dead, children confirmed dead. They weren't falsified, but they were certainly substandard, identified to a particular medical product from Maiden Pharmaceuticals in India. So it seems high time we had a national plan and a policy to tackle such products.
It's very timely. It's very timely, and I think it's a very important development, actually, because it's very funny. Like in the country, most people prefer to go to the pharmacy
than to a doctor.
than to go to be seen by a doctor. So I think that is one thing. This thing would help a lot too, because if you don't have people going to the hospital to do proper checkups, instead rely on prescription drugs from pharmacies, I think it will help a lot, because if you don't do that, then you will put the country into a national crisis, and it's already happening.
Well, this is it, because as you rightly say, the fact that you're not going to a doctor to get, because that's not about to change anytime soon. And because that's not about to change anytime soon, what we do need is exactly that, a plan to tackle and stop substandard or falsified products from getting into the country. But it's not easy. bigger countries than ours are struggling with this, but at least we're now taking that first step towards getting a national plan.
And I
to
think
tackle
it would go a long way if the new laboratory is completed. That way around, the authority would have the chance to test some of these drugs before they are used in the country. I think it's important, because nowadays we have got a lot of diabetes, we have got a lot of high blood patients. So the kind of drug you give them...
No, it's not nowadays. West Africa has
but
traditionally had the highest
but the Gambia is like, it's becoming the capital to some extent. But the risk is having some of these problems, you adding more problems to it by taking drugs that are not fit for your problem. So I think it's high time, and it will go a long way to help. Because I personally know of people who would like certain drugs like Brufen, they like it, but eventually that Brufen brought a lot of problems for them. Like one of the persons I know now, she is hypertension, and it's something else. I think it's very important that there is a control when it comes to our drugs, because most people put a lot of trust in drugs. Like the moment they have headaches, they go for drugs.
I know.
So, but what type of drugs you
take?
take?
Always coming on my desk. Have you got aspirin? Have you got ibuprofen? I say, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a chemist, I don't know.
And I've noticed something, like if you go to some pharmacies, you could have, let's say like paracetamol for $10. If you go to another pharmacy, they could be selling it for $30. So I'm like, is there any difference between the two paracetamol?
In terms of quality.
So probably, I think it's a very good move that the government is taking up such an initiative. It's going to go a long way in helping.
So we wish the Medicines Control Agency every success with this plan. And they're in the midst of putting it together, but I think the sooner the better is essentially what you're saying. Yeah, thank you for that. And now that takes us to a break, and after the break we will have 5 more stories. You know what I'm going to say, don't go away. Join us after the break.
The future is now with QCell's 5G network. Experience speeds like never before with our new 5G Rocket Fixed Internet plan. Get speeds from 10 Mbps to 100 Mbps. Your 5G-enabled devices. Walk into QCell headquarters to get one of our 5G routers and experience the true feeling of 5G. Only with QCell. QCell brings you the future. Tech, innovation, incredible speed. The future is now. For more information, call our customer care on 111. QCell, Sunyabus. We innovate, others follow. Terms and conditions apply.
Hello and welcome after that break. You are watching the Week in Review here on QTV, and it's the first one of 2025, so don't worry, you haven't missed one. Last week we played again the Year in Review, and here going through the stories and giving me some very good insights, I have a friend and colleague Usman Jatta. Usman, thank you for your insights thus far. Thank you. And we have Lamindi Sonko doing the signing. So story number 6, and yes, I know I always say, if you're joining us now, you've missed 5 good stories, but there are 5 good stories still to come. When you hear this, you know I'm not lying, okay? Story number 6, the Turkish ambassador, F. Turka Oba, recently called together the media, and he wanted to give a feedback and some information about some of the work that his country, Turkey, has been doing here in the Gambia. Here's a look and a listen.
The event underscored the enduring partnership between Turkey and the Gambia, highlighting Turkey's significant contributions to the Gambia's development across various sectors. In 2024, trade between the two nations surpassed $80 billion, fueled by strategic investments. Turkish companies have been instrumental in key sectors including ports, healthcare, education, and security. In July 2024, Albera Group, a leading Turkish conglomerate, signed a landmark port concession agreement with the Gambia. The agreement covers the design, construction, financing, maintenance, and cooperation of key ports in Banjo, Basse, and Kauru Island, as well as the development of the Sanyang Deep Sea Port. Karparship, another prominent Turkish company, has played a pivotal role in providing electricity to the Gambia.
There you are. Across the board, Osman, Turkish involvement, and I guess it's when somebody like the ambassador puts it in this kind of context that people think, oh, actually they're doing quite a lot here.
Sure.
We didn't even mention the training of our police, training of the army, and all that stuff. So Turkey, you know, back in the day when I was young, they called them Turkey. And then some years ago they said, no, the name is Turkey. And so we're not the BBC who insist on still calling them Turkey. It's Turkey. Though that's the country we're talking about, in case you're wondering. But yeah, they do quite a lot here, don't they?
I think their intervention shows the importance of through friendship, and they have really demonstrated that in many ways, you know, from security, education, health, and now in the new port.
I'm glad you mentioned health. They recently sent some doctors over here.
So they're doing a lot. But to highlight the area of security and the port expansion, the deep sea port at Sanyang, Kaur, Basse, and Banjul as well. So it's going
game
to
changer.
It's a game changer.
Yeah,
it's going to open, you know, the way forward for the country. You know, they're telling you the Albera group, like the Al port of Banjul, when fully completed, like it's going to generate the Gambia's percentage would be 3 times what is generated at the other at the port in Banjul here. So it's a very crucial relationship, and I think the government should be commended, and equally as well. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs should work harder to make sure that like they establish more positive relationships with countries. That way around, they would help to empower our youth. Now, when you go to the security sector, most of our members of the Gambia Armed Forces now have the chance to travel to Turkey, to offer their...
That's all right, we'll forgive you.
Yes, to enhance their knowledge on security trainings. I think it will go a long way in empowering the country and also promoting, you know, development in the country.
And one of the things I was impressed with, there was a story we did some time ago when some of our, I think it was the police, they went to Turkey for 6 months, and these guys came back and they were speaking fluent Turkish.
Sure.
And I was impressed. I thought, yeah, this is good. So yes, it's an ongoing one, and you say it demonstrates friendship, you know, true friendship. We also talk about the car power ship.
Sure.
When we were having struggles with electricity, of course, it's not free. I mean, it's a commercial entity. You know, we had to pay for it, but it really did help at a time when, you know, we were having severe challenges in terms of electricity generation. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, you know, long may the friendship continue. Thank you for that. Thank you. And now story number 7. If you go to most of our fishing villages along the coast, Atlantic coast particularly, you'll see a lot of non-Gambians actually, mainly Senegalese, I have to say. Every time I've gone Gunjur, Tangier and so on, Sanyang even, the Ministry of Fisheries and Water Resources recently came up with a scheme to start making some inroads in changing that particular narrative. What have they done? This will tell you.
The handing over of the 20 artisanal fishing boats and accessories to communities and associations nationwide is part of the ministry's efforts to decentralize the fishing sector. It marks a significant advancement towards strengthening and enhancing the knowledge of smallholder fishermen and communities. To boost the fishing industry, Buba Sanyang is the Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Fisheries.
I want to underscore that this is a very important intervention by the Ministry of Fisheries to the communities. If you look first, the government is trying to curb the illegal migration, especially the backways.
It's going to be one of those. This government, through this same ministry, have done this before, and it did not go well. We had people who sold the boats. We had people who just decided to rent it to other non-Gambians.
Usman, some ambitious aims there to curb, he said illegal, these days refer to it as irregular migration. 20 boats given to some communities. It needs a lot more than this. And of course, they were candid enough to say the government had tried something similar and it hadn't worked because people had sold the boats or they'd rented it to others.
Sure.
This time we're hoping it's not going to be that way.
I think it's quite impressive. It's a good start with possible positive outcomes rather. So I think it would go a long way, and like you highlighted, the main concern would be sustainability of the boats. But we've heard from the governor of the West Coast region, Osman Bojang, who did mention that they are working on modalities to make sure that they register these boats and also come up with other strategies that would help to maintain the sustainability of these boats, actually, because you know, these boats are very important. They would go a long way in promoting, you know, empowering associations and beneficiary communities. And as they mentioned, the main goal is to also
generate jobs.
Generate jobs and also like discourage irregular migration.
Yeah, because if you're earning a good living from fishing, why do you need to go to Spain and earn a pittance?
It's the question, except if you want to go enjoy the snow or...
Exactly. But no, there is a serious point to it, as you said. So they've started with 20 boats for the moment, and they expect to kind of escalate it because these are boats given to people and communities that haven't been able to afford their own. And so we heard from the communities, they're very much welcoming the initiative, and they hope it's something that can be scaled up.
And importantly, they are not just empty boats. They are boats with modern engines. So if properly maintained, it could generate a lot of income for these beneficiary communities.
Well, it could, but I have to say there was one cynical person in the office who said, this is exactly the sort of thing you give them with an outboard engine, they'll use it for this backway journey. We hope they don't. So, but on a serious note, you know, you are right. They are empowering communities, and they're giving people hope and say, look, you could get a very good living from this if you utilize it properly, you maintenance and you service the boats properly. And that's an element that I would have liked to have heard more emphasis placed on. How do we maintenance, how do we service these boats?
Yeah, I think that is a critical question that needs to be given much attention, actually, like the maintenance part of it, because it has affected most projects in the country.
We don't have a good record in that.
Except if we outsource. What we could do is like get people from, from China or other countries, or even neighboring Senegal. You know, they could offer training. Like
I was going to say training is what is required.
That would go a long way, you know, in making sure that the maintenance of the boats are guaranteed. But I think I just wanted to say one important thing. It's high time that the beneficiary communities also take ownership of the boats, and equally as well, they should have they should trust the system. They should have the mindset that they can make it in Gambia. It's all about that. But if you build the mindset that I cannot make it in Gambia, obviously you will not have that peace of mind to stay in the country. But you have to have faith and just give it your best. As far as you're engaged into a business, the future is bright.
Indeed. And you know, you touched on a very good point about ownership, literally ownership. What communities could do is say, okay, every month we'll put down a certain amount of dollars for hiring the mechanic who's going to come and service our boat, because we're benefiting from it. You know, we're not just waiting for government. They've already given us the boat. Okay, let's show that we also can play a part in sustaining it, because we're earning a living from it. So, you know, every month you put down $5 each amongst however many of you, and when you need to call that mechanic to come and service it, you just dip into that and pay it. It's not going from one person's
that would
pocket.
encourage the government to embark on more initiatives. You know, it will really encourage them to empower them more, you know, because they are, for the fact that they are taking ownership, it means a lot. You know, and the government would really want to see that sense of responsibility to some extent. But it's sad at times when things are given to people, they're like, it belongs to the government. But the government is the people. So if you're not making good use of it, it's like now you're putting a burden on yourself instead, because that is how the 16th president of America defined democracy, Abraham Lincoln, the government of the people, by the people, and for the people. So obviously people should take ownership of the boats.
Indeed. Thank you for that. Thank you. And now on to story number 8, and one that if you've been watching me on QTV, listening to me on Q Radio, it's one that I go on and on and on about. And I'll stop going on and on and on about it when we stop doing this. What am I talking about? I'm talking about waste and litter in our communities. Have a look, have a listen.
The rubbish we are talking about consists of unwanted things or waste materials such as empty tins and bottles, used papers, waste foods, metals, plastics, old scrapped vehicles, tires, the remains of dead animals, watermelons, orange and banana peels, etc. Some people are trying to reverse this trend. One such place is Farafenni Town, the Mauritania Lower Basic School, which for over 3 years has been the cleanest school campus. At Kanifing, QTV went into St. Teresa's Lower Basic School's campus while some students were out, and it was amazing to see how clean and neat the school campus.
We heard there, I guess that's where we really should start with school children, teaching the adults rather than the other way around, because if you start young and you inculcate the attitude that keep a clean environment is healthy for you, as they become adults, they will maintain that.
I think I would start from the home, which is the first school to some extent.
Very much.
Yeah, it's important. The way we train our children matters a lot. You see, as young as 2 years, if you start instructing him or her, the child will be able to understand a lot. Imagine, you see 2 years children, browsing through TikTok, they can check on different contents. If you put that, if you have a trash bin at home, trust me, eventually they would get used to it. And by the time they get to school, it's like the saying it goes, catch them while they are young. It helps a lot. At school, I could recall there was this, so I call it a mantra, pick as you move. So it was written all over the school. Right. So while you're moving, you will pick anything you see. But I think beyond that,
hopefully they had bins for you to dispose of.
Yes, there are bins. I'm coming to that. It's a national crisis because it does not only demonstrate the level of discipline in the country, but it also demonstrates there needs to be teamwork. You cannot tell people to be taking proper care of waste in the country, when it comes to making sure that they are well collected and so forth, put in the right place, without having bins around as well.
But what about these people who annoy me? They're sitting in their car. You got children in the back. You finish your watermelon, you just lob it out the window.
That's
I don't expect you to throw it in the bin. I expect you to wait till you get somewhere where you can dispose of it properly.
That is where the discipline part comes in. I can attest to you, if you open my bag right now, you might find a lot of paper in it, because usually I don't like if I eat and just throw like that. I have been molded from school, and that keep as you move, slogan has really changed a lot.
Sunk into your head.
So anytime I throw something, I'm like, I cannot contribute. It's already, the streets are already filthy, but I cannot contribute. I cannot add up to those, to the dirt already created. So I think there is a need for people to, for parents in particular, guardians, to work hard to make sure that.
So here's my suggestion, and I want to know what you think of it. I suggested when I saw this, and I spoke to Don, I said, why don't we have a national cleanest school competition as a start, where children can, keep and compete to be the cleanest
I think
school.
that would be awesome, because that idea would be like killing two birds with one stone. Now, you're conducting a competition, but you're also inculcating a concept in their minds to make sure that they maintain cleanliness, throughout. But equally as well, I think from government side, it would be important to revive the monthly cleanup last Saturday, Set-Al. It helps a lot.
They're doing it in Senegal
now. The
now.
fact that, you keep cars, no cars will run till 1 o'clock, it's a very good initiative. That alone will tell people that, yes, there is something that needs to be done. And everybody will come out. Imagine, even if you don't go to the streets, but even within your own house, you would clean it. So I think it's a very good initiative, and it should not be politicized. That is my take.
Excellent. We should not be politicized, because when bad health comes, it doesn't care which political party you belong to. Thank you for that. And that takes us on to story number 9, which will be our penultimate story. First time we did a thing on hostmanship, and I got the letter saying, can you come and cover a course on hostmanship? I thought there'd been a misspelling, a typo. I thought they meant horsemanship. And I was expecting, and then when my colleague came back and said, no, it's about hosting events and hosting people, and then the penny dropped. So this year we went again to see something to do with hostmanship. Have a look, have a listen.
To report significant improvements in service delivery and operational efficiency by GID staff at Banjul International Airport. The art of making passengers feel welcome have greatly enhanced our professionalism and bolstered our reputation. This partnership and the training it facilitates are invaluable in our journey towards excellence.
Usman, I'll tell you my selfish reason for doing this. When you go into any country, you land at an airport, the Gambia Immigration Department officials, if you land in the Gambia, are the first people that you encounter, really. And if your experience is not good, then that can reflect. And the reason I mention it from a personal perspective is that when I went to Morocco and I landed at Casablanca, the experience I got from the officials there made me swear that unless somebody put a gun to my head, I would never fly through Casablanca airport again. And on that flight, I suspect I was not the only one who had that feeling. And so hostmanship, the art of it, as we heard the official there mention, is crucial. You're the first person that people encounter, so you need to put on a good face for your country.
The story reminds me of a colleague's statement, first impression.
Yeah.
He is very concerned about that.
First impressions
If
count.
he is watching, he must be laughing, but he's very concerned about first impression.
There's a phrase, first impressions are lasting impressions.
Like you mentioned, the airport, the seaport, they're always the first point of contact. So we say the smiling coast. The smiling coast should start from the airport. So if the first impression at the airport goes wrong, it's a problem for the country. So the picture it depicts is bad. It's selling the country in a very negative way. So I think it's a very important training, and that would go a long way in promoting the country's hostmanship to some extent, actually. So I think it's key. It's key for the fact that the country is expecting more visitors for this year. So it will go a long way, and it's a lesson. Like if you're doing your job, you have to do it all way in. You don't have to do it because for the sake of doing it. You have to give it your best. The passion has to be there. You also have to understand the importance of your job.
You just took I was going to use that very phrase, I swear. Understand the importance of your job.
Yeah.
You are an ambassador for your country. Because if I come to the Gambia and I come to the ports and I meet some grumpy, upset guy, I'm like, what's wrong with him? I thought this was the smiling coast. So
it's important. It's important. If the moment people have that mindset, this country would move to another level, because no job is not every job is important.
Every job is important. Thank you for that. And that takes us to our final story number 10. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, they had not executed anybody since 2003. And then all of a sudden this week, they have executed 172 people. Why? Have a look, have a listen.
On the 5th of January 2025, DRC's Justice Minister, Constant Mutamba, announced that more than 170 people allegedly linked to criminal gangs commonly known as Kulana or bandits had been transferred from the capital Kinshasa to Angenga prison in northwest DRC for execution. He said those transferred to Angenga were between 18 and 35 years old and had been involved in urban violence. Authorities have claimed resuming executions would help combat urban gangs, a claim unsupported by any evidence. Mutamba has previously threatened people suspected of links to criminal gangs with arrest, conviction, and the death penalty.
Usman, this story sent shockwaves around the world, not just around Africa, because even in countries that do have the death penalty, there'd been a sort of moratorium. Even here, before it was abolished, there'd been a moratorium. And as I said there, so for 21 years, nobody had been executed until, this year, and huge. Constant Mutamba, the minister there, was saying at the press conference, I watched the whole press conference, it's about 30 minutes, he spoke in French. He said there's been a problem about gangs breaking into people's houses, robbing people on the streets, and this was to send a strong message, but really quite a drastic measure.
The issue at Congo is DR Congo is a critical issue
and complex one.
It's a very critical issue, but like you said, like it's geared towards setting a warning and you know, like to enlighten people on like the possible outcomes of engaging into a gang, like criminal, to become a gang criminal. So it's something else actually, but it's very critical. But it also raises the debate. You know, are there other alternatives that could be put in place to make good use of some of these people that are victims? You know, maybe like engage them into agriculture, but they will be within, you know, they will be confined and they will be monitored. You know. In that way, they could be transformed, they could contribute to the economy while they are serving their death sentence.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, because a bit that you didn't see there and the viewers didn't see is that one of the things that they do, not for serious criminals who are serving life or death sentences, but for others who are, you know, fairly lengthy sentences, 10, 15 years or so, they take them to go and clean the communities.
Sure.
And obviously they're under armed guard the whole time. And so this is, you know, this is one of the things that, you know, they do where, you know, so yes, I mean, that's a possibility, but killing somebody.
The only problem that comes in the mind is these people are gang criminals. So the chances of like being monitored it could be dangerous as well. They could attack the officers. But like we've seen in the Gambia, I think it's a good move. Like we've seen inmates, you know, whose lives have been transformed. Now they are learning new skills, and I think that is very, very crucial, because now, you know, they are being, you know, their reintegration in society would be easy. You know, the moment you go, you're out from prison, automatically you would fit in society.
Sure. Well, you kill somebody, you can't reintegrate them.
That's the problem.
Thank you for that, Osman. So thank you for your interjections. Thank you to Lamindi Sonko for your translations and interpretations. And of course, thank you to you, the viewers, for watching and for listening. And thank you to our control room who keep us on point throughout. Thank you, everybody. Until next week, goodbye.